Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven, WNHH, your home for community radio. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you on an exploration of what makes the Elm City and the Nutmeg State tick. Kurt Miller is looking to make Connecticut tick by becoming our next state comptroller. That's comptroller.
Comptroller.
If you live in New Haven, it's controller.
Little difference between the two jobs.
And Kurt is the endorsed Republican candidate for the open position. He faces challenger Mark Greenberg in an August 14th party primary. Kurt is also the current first selectman of Seymour. Welcome to the studio, Kurt. How nice to have you back.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back in New Haven.
And we're also going to thank Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. So, Kurt Miller, you just said comptroller and controller are different positions. How so?
A controller generally reports to a CFO.
Okay.
Whereas a comptroller generally is an independent person that oversees a CFO. So in Connecticut's case...
I never knew that. I always thought it was like last will and testament words for two different derivations that actually meant the same thing and were interchangeable.
No, actually, I looked it up a while ago just to understand the difference myself. But, you know, a comptroller should be an independent person, not really beholden to a CFO, CEO, making sure that things are running efficiently and effectively. And that's the role of the Connecticut comptroller. Is the chief fiscal guardian of the state of Connecticut.
So should we in cities be changing controllers to comptrollers to get rid of political influence?
I think it's something that should certainly be considered. I also think that town managers or city managers should also be something that's considered. You need to have professionals that understand how to manage money, how to run operations, to try to take the politics out of those. That's one of the things that I really like, and the thing that attracted me to the comptroller's position is that's what that is. It's not necessarily beholden to politics.
But we do elect the person, so it's even more political. Like you're going around, you spend all your time trying to convince Republicans to vote for you in the August 14th primary. Does that inject too much politics?
I don't think so, because I think money is money and financial matters are financial matters. I think everyone tends to have a very similar belief in that they all want efficient and effective government.
And as you said, the comptroller is not the budget director. The governor names a budget director, Office of Policy and Management.
Correct.
And that person decides we're going to cut here, we're going to do that. What does the comptroller do day to day?
Comptroller, in my opinion, it's the person who's responsible to hold the governor and the legislature responsible for the financial decisions that they make. They hold them accountable to report on what's good and what's bad.
And is that different from, I guess that is different from the auditors. The auditors look at everything in government and whether government actions are carrying out what the legislative mandates are, correct?
Correct.
Whereas the comptroller is more narrowly supposed to put out reports on the financial condition of the state, correct?
Correct.
You also sign the checks, right?
You do sign the checks, yes. Yes.
And why is that instead of the budget director? I guess because that's what a comptroller is, partly just keeping the money coming in and out of
right,
accounts.
just to make sure, again, things are efficient and effective and money's being spent the right way.
So, Kurt, is that the two biggest functions of comptroller? Day-to-day checks getting paid, getting sent out to people, and then having, a monthly look for an independent look for the public to see of how our financial condition is holding up that month.
In my opinion, those are the two most important things that the comptroller does do, yes.
Okay, and Clyde James Ramos writes in, have to admit, I never knew what a comptroller did. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Clyde, for writing in.
Thanks, Clyde.
Now, you said that Kurt Miller, who's the Republican-endorsed candidate for the position, you said that what really defines this position and what makes someone good for it is knowing how to keep an eye on the money. You've been doing that on a more active level as the first selectman of Seymour.
Yes.
And you've had 3 straight town, because in Seymour everyone gets to vote on the budget.
Yes, we have a referendum.
In New Haven, boy, they would have had torch burning parades because we just raised taxes 11%.
It would have been an interesting
so
year.
So you had 3 straight years in which your town budget, including your school budget, which is a separate vote, did not go up.
Correct.
The mill rate is held steady for 3 years at 36 mills.
Yes.
And the voters each time voted yes. I didn't know voters anywhere voted yes for any budget these days. What's going on in Seymour? And without making this too much of a softball question, is it your fault that taxes aren't going up, or is something good happening in Seymour?
Well, when I took office in 2011, Seymour was on a very similar path to the state of Connecticut, spending more than it should, using rainy day funds to pay reoccurring expenses, borrowing more than it should, a lot of those things. So I assembled a team of people. We put together a very aggressive 5-year plan that would get Seymour out of the financial condition that it was in. We worked that plan. We didn't deviate from it, and now we're reaping the rewards of that. It's very similar to what the state of Connecticut needs to do. It's taken us 30 years to get into the problems that we're in. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. We need to put a team together in place that's going to work to get Connecticut out of the mess that it's in.
So whom did you say no to in Seymour to stop having to borrow money and raid the rainy day fund to meet the budget?
Well, it was about having a better understanding of how we spend our money. We look for efficiencies, not only in our day-to-day operations, but looking at efficiencies in the way that we handle our benefits packages, the way that we borrow our money, and also taking a look at the money that has already been borrowed. Is there a way that we can refinance or restructure the
and
debt?
kick it down the can? Because they were down the road, kick the can down the road.
Yep.
Wrong cliche. In New Haven, they get criticized for refinancing their debt every once in a while so that it's going to cost us more down the road, but for a few years you get breathing room. Did you do that?
No, not to that extent. What we had was a bond upgrade in the town of Seymour. So we went from a AA- to a AA+, which is S&P's second highest rating.
In which case you can borrow money in more favorable terms. So at that
Correct.
point, you borrow the money to repay the old debt.
Yes.
But you had to do something to get there. How did you get from AA- to AA+?
Well, we looked at the core financials of the town of Seymour and how we needed to improve them to get us to that level. So we brought our fund balance from 5% up to 13%.
Is fund balance the rainy day
The
fund?
rainy day fund, yeah.
And when you get your bond rating set, the bond rating agencies look at how much. That's one of the things they look at, how well your pensions are funded, right, and what your outstanding debt is, and how much you have in that rainy day fund.
Correct.
So
Correct.
how did you do it? What did you cut, or what did you raise money from? What efficiencies did you find?
I mean, one of the first things we started to do was looking at, on a weekly basis, I meet with the Director of Operations and the Director of Finance, and we go through the actual budget runs. We look at the checks. We look for trends. We try to find places where there's wasteful spending. I mean, it is a long and grueling process, but something that needs to be done. And what we started to see was we were having small surpluses each year. So we were able to take those surpluses, put those back into the rainy day fund, and start to build that up. Then, as we were looking at the state of Connecticut, we realized that Connecticut was going down the wrong financial path, that we needed to prepare to be a little bit more independent of the state of Connecticut, because we knew financial cuts would be coming in municipal funding. So we created something.
That's interesting, because in New Haven, we were counting on getting more aid.
Right. Yeah, we put in something called the mill rate stabilization account, where we wanted to be able to control the mill rate for our residents and not be as beholden to municipal funding. When we did get funding...
You mean state municipal funding?
Correct. When we did get that funding, we were able to take that money and put it into the rainy day fund or the fund balance to grow it that way. So, I'm proud to say Seymour took one of the 20 largest cuts in municipal funding last year, about $2.1 million. We did not have to go back to the residents for additional taxes.
And that's because you were squirreled more away. Did you have to tap into your rainy day fund to do that?
A small amount, only about $200,000.
So where'd the other $2 million?
We had it built into the budget.
You built in.
We built in, and then we did some restructuring with our debt, again, using the principles that we just spoke about to give us that flexibility.
So I'm still looking, when you looked at those trends, what did you find? What was an inefficiency you cut out? I'm looking for specifics. So what you saw and what kind of cuts you made or efficiencies you created by keeping that week-to-week eye on the checks going out at Seymour.
Biggest thing we found was in management. You need to have efficient managers that understand the process, that understand how to run departments. When I first took office, I had 27 direct reports. So as you can imagine, my day was consumed.
That's a lot for selectmen. I think in bigger cities they have fewer than that.
That's a lot for everybody. So my day was spent in meetings with people telling me things that I didn't necessarily need to know.
Better you than me.
So we reorganized government. We brought managers in and reshuffled the deck to put people in appropriate places. There's that book, Good to Great. I don't know if you've ever read it, where it talks about getting the right people on the bus. But it goes a little further. It says not only get the right people on the bus, but get them in the right seats. So we spent time getting these managers in the right seats and giving them the ability to run their departments,
so
holding them accountable.
Anybody.
Did not fire anybody, no.
So what did they have to do? They must have found efficiencies then if you were holding them accountable.
They did. I mean, and I would tell them the department is yours to run. So you're going to be rewarded when your department runs well, but you're going to be held accountable when it does not.
So
and they took
give me
ownership.
Some specifics. So what inefficiencies did they find?
Well, we looked at some things, as an example, in our public works department. We found some things in our recreation department, just the way money was coming in and out, the way money was being used. We looked at our debt service. We looked at our employee benefits. We changed employee benefits.
You have to negotiate that with the union, correct?
Correct.
So what did they agree to do?
We went to a high deductible health savings plan.
And why did they agree to that?
There was some benefits to them. We fund 50% of the deductible. And then as an incentive, we gave out salary bonuses to our employees as well, because we understood that they were making a change that we needed as well to kind of meet them halfway. And they felt having a little bit more money in their pocket, but still having good health insurance coverage was something that was good. And over the last couple of years, we've moved every employee to the town of Seymour
To an HSA.
Board of Ed onto
That's
that
a
type
hard
of plan.
sell to a lot of unions. So you convinced them that if they get some more money
Mhm.
in their salary, you can save more money on what you're paying for their health care because they were so happy to have that money in their pocket.
Yes, and they were also paying less in employee cost share than they had been previous.
So where did the saving come from?
The lower premiums saved us money. Now, this year alone, we switched from Anthem to Cigna. There's a savings of about $1 million
Wow.
to the town of Seymour. So, we're
So how
constantly
but
looking.
why were you charged lower premiums? Because the health savings account, whereas they had to have more at risk every time they made a decision to go to the doctor, so there's incentive to use less. What from the insurance agency? Why were they able to charge you less?
When, a regular PPO type plan, the insurance company's on the hook from $1. With the high deductible plans, there's generally a deductible that needs to be met before the insurance company
Right.
kicks in. For us, for a family plan, it was $4,000, not $4 million, $4,000. So employees, when it's their money at stake right away, they're maybe not as quick to go to the doctor, which helps keep the loss ratios down. Which
Long
in turn,
term, does that raise costs because they're not going to the doctor when they need to, and then they get deeper problems?
I don't think so, because, again, we provide 50% of that deductible to them up front, so the first $2,000. Then they have the ability to put money in an HSA account, which would be tax-free if it's used for
And we're getting in the
appropriate
weeds-
medical expenses.
We're getting the weeds with Kurt Miller, who was the first selectman of Seymour, has kept his mill rate steady for 3 years, even in the face of state budget cuts. So now he's asking the voters first in an August 14th Republican primary, and then in the November 6th, is it, general election, to make him our next state comptroller, the person who not only signs the checks,
Yes.
but is directed by our Constitution, I believe, to be in the role to, or at least in job description, to tell us every month independently how we're doing on our finances. Why do you want this job? You'll no longer be able to make those decisions. You'll just be out there in the wind saying, yeah, I'm signing the checks, but if I think you have some, let's say you have a Governor Lamont, you might think he's crazy how he's spending his money, so you could say that, but you can't change it.
Well, true, but the thing that I enjoy most about being first selectman is the finance process. Doing the budget, things like that. That people think I'm crazy, but that brings me the most
that
joy.
has the most impact.
So this comptroller position, I think I can use my skills and things that I've developed over the last 8 years to benefit the state of Connecticut. And as Seymour was successful because we had a great team of people, I just want to be a member of that team that works together to make Connecticut
So does that mean
a
you're
better
hoping
place.
for a Republican sweep this year?
Well, no, because again, the comptroller's office is independent, and when I say
Right.
team, it's a team of people that each need to do their parts to play their roles to make Connecticut stronger. Mine is to be that independent watchdog to make sure that the money is being spent correctly. I think professionally and experience-wise, I think my skills match up well for that position. I think I could be an asset to the taxpayers of the state of Connecticut.
All right, and Kevin Ferrace, I'm sorry to say your name wrong, has checked in to say hello. Hello, thanks for listening.
Hello, Kevin.
WNH's Dateline New Haven. So, did you grow up in Seymour?
I did. Actually lived my whole life in Seymour with the exception of a couple years after college. I spent some time up in Boston.
And how long, what got you into politics?
Actually, it's something I always wanted to do since I was a kid.
Why?
I remember seeing the yard signs and as a kid saying, wow, what do you need to do to get your name on a yard sign?
You wanted your name right there on the lawn.
Yeah, and after
Miller.
one of the elections, my mother brought home all the yard signs. She went to the different, Democratic and Republican committees, got the signs. I came home, they're all hung up on my wall, and that kind of started
That's
my
cute.
fascination.
Did you
with
follow national politics at all, or was this all a town thing?
it. For me, it was all local. I've paid a little bit of attention, but when I was younger, to national politics. Obviously, I pay a little bit more attention now, just to the impact it has on Connecticut and potentially down onto the towns and cities.
And so, you said it was 2011 or 2013 you became first selectman?
2011.
2011.
2011. So my fourth term.
And so how is Seymour doing? Has it sort of a transition? I remember when the Seymour Specialty Wire back in the early 80s was closing down. That had always been the big employer. Now I think it's a Stop and Shop, right?
Yes.
And so it was a factory town.
It was.
It's not a factory town anymore.
No, not anymore. We have industrial park that has a lot of our technology and commerce campus. Now we have two major companies that are there. One, Basement Systems, and then Thule, the company that makes the bicycle racks. Their North American headquarters is in Seymour.
So they have as many jobs as the factory used to have?
That I can't say because I'm not 100% sure how many jobs they have.
Did they
but
make up what you lost in the tax base?
yeah, they definitely do. They're both large employers, large taxpayers.
And so has the town in better financial shape than it had been? Does it have a better tax base than it used to, employment base? Or just it made that transition? Because the whole valley didn't make that transition.
I think
and Sony are still catching up.
Yeah, and Sony's still catching up. Derby's still catching up. Obviously, Shelton leads the way, valley towns because of its proximity.
Those are corporate headquarters. Yeah.
Well, but if you look at Shelton 25 years ago, they were like Seymour was. They put a plan in place, and they relentlessly worked that plan, built Shelton up to where it is now. Seymour is, in year 6 or 7, depending on how you look at it, of a similar plan. So I fully expect that in 10 years, we're going to see very similar results to what Shelton's had.
Is that corporate headquarters, white-collar jobs? Is it more blue-collar jobs?
I'm not sure if it's white-collar or blue-collar, which is better. But what I think is important is having a predictable environment that businesses want to come into to run their business, to house their business or their business.
By predictable means the tax? Is that just
taxes, understanding what they're going to get from there. When you have a tax rate that's constantly bouncing up and down, when you have uncertainty in government, how government's going to act and behave, I think business owners are going to be a little hesitant to move to that town. If you look at, I mentioned Thule and Basement Systems. Over the last couple of years combined, they're going to invest about $40 million back into their operations. So when you have two of your largest employers and two of your largest taxpayers making that kind of significant reinvestment, you can take from that they're very comfortable the direction that the town is going in. That's what we're looking for.
All right. And then, so state, I take it you're of the school, and also Scott Nile and Bonnie Rodriguez are checking in on Facebook. Thanks for listening, folks. Are you making that critique about the state? I mean, there are two views on why we've lost some corporate headquarters in Connecticut. One is that they don't have that predictable environment. They say that you never know, taxes are high, and that they feel that the legislature, you never know what it can do from month to month. The other school from that's the Republican view, right? The Democrat view, and there's so far overlap. The Democrat view is, in fact, we're not investing enough in the right things. That it's not that we have to tax less, but that we have to invest in the kind of infrastructure, whether it's public transportation, education, but especially technology, links to education, that create the environment we had in Boston that got Alexion to go there, and GE, that got people to go to New York because of the critical mass of talent. Are you in the first camp?
Well, I'm kind of in both camps, to be totally honest with you.
But without the money, if you don't tax people more, you're not going to make those investments unless you cut something else.
Well, true. But again, I think a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the loss of revenue is a lot of these, not only corporations, but wealthy folks who are leaving the state of Connecticut for better environments.
Though? I know you could pick a couple individuals and they matter because they pay a lot of tax in the financial industry, but in fact, our taxes are not higher than neighboring states.
No, but again, if you look at the overall tax impact that we have from state and local taxes, there's a large burden that are placed on people. And if they can move, as an example, to someplace down south where they can get a substantially reduced rate in taxes across the board, when you're talking about someone that has, hundreds of millions of dollars, it's a lot of money that they can save to move, and they have the ability to do that.
So where are we going to get the money to invest in infrastructure if we don't tax people?
I think the first thing we need to do is we need to stabilize what we have. If you look during Governor Malloy's tenure as governor, we've seen the two largest tax increases in Connecticut's history, and we still face multi-billion-dollar deficits every biennium.
It's fair to say that one of the two biggest drivers of that deficit is the pension problem. We're underfunded pensions, particularly with older pensioners. There are two tiers.
Correct.
And that thanks to Democrats and Republicans in the past, not putting enough money into those funds and delaying some of the big payments in balloon style until the point we haven't reached yet, we're really getting slammed. How would you, as comptroller, you'd have a role weighing in on these issues? What should we be doing about that?
I mean, we need to sit down with the employees and look at creative ways to solve this problem. Now, we have started to make changes to the pension system, and there's different tiers on the state plan. I'm a member of CCM, Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, its executive board. Every year, as part of our lobbying initiative, we put forward changes to the MERS plan, which is the Municipal Employees Retirement System, to add tiers just like they have in the state system. Every single year, the Labor Commission, or Labor Committee, I should say, doesn't even let it come out of committee. So again, when changes are made,
by tiers, you're talking about getting people to 401k style plans,
right? Defined contribution, whether it be some type of hybrid, defined benefit, defined contribution. We're not talking necessarily about the existing employees. We're talking about new employees. I don't think we should be taking benefits away from existing employees. These people took these positions.
And that's, in fact, Democrats and Republicans alike have been striking deals like that with unions on the municipal level. But we still got that big bill to pay for the older employees. What are we going to do about that?
That's something, there's no magic bullet for that, Paul. There's no easy answer to get out of this solution because, as I said, this is 30 or 40 years in the making. It's not something that's going to be fixed in 1 or 2 years, but it's going to take everybody to sit down at the table and have true constructive conversation. We can't exclude the unions from this conversation. They need to be a part of it, but the unions, Republicans and Democrats, all need to sit down with open minds and say, we have this problem in front of us. We need to create a plan, and together we need to work that plan. That's the only way that it's going to be fixed.
Kurt Miller, we have a few minutes left here. The Citizens Election Program, are you running with public financing dollars?
I am running with public financing dollars, yes.
Okay, and have you qualified?
I have not qualified as of yet. Our goal is to be qualified by August 1st.
And then August 14th, you have the primary.
Correct.
Your opponent, Mark Greenberg, has said that we should revisit the tax exemptions that universities and hospitals get. So therefore, you wouldn't need to have more municipal aids to stabilize cities, but they would be able to finally get the tax revenue the state doesn't let them collect from their biggest taxpayers, whether it's hospitals or universities. This is not a Democrat-Republican issue. It kind of cuts across both parties. Where do you stand on that one?
I don't think that the universities or the hospitals should face any new taxes. If you look at some of the things, and one of the things you had mentioned earlier was, having kids in Connecticut that can meet the demand for these companies for these jobs. If we start charging taxes to these universities, let's use Yale as an example because I know we're right here in New Haven. Maybe kids that are not going to come to New Haven, not going to stay here in Connecticut, they're going to go to other schools and perhaps they're getting better opportunities. I just don't think it makes sense to add more taxes.
So you think that Yale, which has a $23 billion endowment, gets students from all over the world, most of whom don't stay here, that if they had to pay a few $1 million more in taxes, we would have fewer people going to Yale and staying in Connecticut?
Maybe Yale's a bad example because of it, but let's use UNH as an example. Might be a better example of that. But you have to remember something, too. These universities and colleges, they bring kids into the communities. These kids rent houses, they buy food, they use services, they bring money into the economy.
Wouldn't they have to take more kids in to meet a higher tax bill? And wouldn't we get more of those kids?
Potentially. But, is the university able to do that? Do they have the capacity with classrooms, with professors? Bringing in more kids, it sounds easy on its face. But what is the actual cost for them to bring in more kids?
What about the governor's case that some of the big hospitals have fund balances, which are otherwise called profits, sometimes in the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars? The executives get paid a lot. Why shouldn't they pay taxes the way other businesses do?
Well, I think they provide services a lot of times to people that don't have the means to do that. A lot of these hospitals don't turn people away at the door. They perform these, whether they be emergency surgeries, emergency procedures.
On Medicare.
Right. And Medicaid. They're losing money in those areas. So if they have a strong management team that's able to make that hospital run efficiently and effectively to provide the service to the folks who need it, then I think they should be paying those folks the appropriate wage for them to do that because they provide a service to the community that goes much beyond taxes.
So, Kurt, if the state is saying to cities like New Haven that are more than half their property tax exempt by order of the state, if you're saying you can't tax those people, and we're not going to pay you back the 70% in payments in lieu of taxes we promised you, which they're not doing, they're only meeting half the obligation, but we're not going to let you tax them, what are cities supposed to do? Are you going to increase you think they should increase pilot payments?
That's a tough question, honestly, for the cities. I think the state needs to be doing things to help the cities provide opportunity. And, there's different things that the cities can do that benefit the cities that may not benefit the towns and communities. As an example, if the city of New Haven wants to add 1%, as an example of a sales tax, we'll call it, to hotels and restaurants and entertainment and things like that, why should they not be able to do that in specific cases? Now, if you look at that, 1%, that's $1 on $100 spent on a meal. It's not going to change a family from going out to dinner. It's not going to change a business person who's coming into New Haven that's going to rent a hotel.
But it will cause your party to go ballistic and charge that Democrats are once again taxing the hell out of everybody.
Well, no, because
their hard-earned money.
If you make it the towns and cities' choice, I'm for giving the towns and cities the opportunity to decide what's best for them. I don't like when Hartford dictates down to the towns and cities, this is what you need to do.
So you would support enabling legislation.
Yes.
Is it fair that in order to compete with suburbs, cities have to make up for not getting their state promised dollars on tax-exempt property by having to charge more taxes than their suburban competitors to get customers?
Well, I would argue that, the towns outside of cities are not getting the same benefit of the mass of people that live in the city. We're in a very tall building. There's no buildings like this in Seymour. So these buildings are getting taxed. So I would argue there's more opportunity for tax revenue in cities. Towns don't get all that they're promised either.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we're able to manage our money a little bit better. And, we're able to make ends meet at the end of the day.
That's going to be a inspiring story of people in New Haven about planning for those those aid cuts from Hartford that you did in Seymour.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just budgeting 1 year at a time. You need to be looking down the road 3 and 5 years and understanding decisions you're making today, the impact that they're going to have in the future. And unfortunately, a lot of towns and cities don't do that, and the state of Connecticut absolutely does not do that.
Who's your hero or role model?
I would say Ronald Reagan. I know that's kind of cliche for a Republican, but, I always saw President Reagan as kind of a regular guy, that came in, did the job that he needed to do, wasn't flashy, said what he wanted to say. And, he had a philosophy and agenda, and he was, he was proud of that, and he wore it on his sleeve.
All right. Well, Kurt Miller, thanks so much for coming in to WNHH.
Thanks for having me, Paul. I appreciate the time.
About your campaign for comptroller. You gave us a little lesson here in comp versus controllers. And while you want to be the next comptroller of the state of Connecticut, you got a Republican primary coming August 14th.
Yes.
And you got a general election November 6th. How can people find out more about you?
If you'd like to go to my website, which is kurt4ct.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. And I'd love to answer any questions anybody has. So please drop me a note, and I'd be happy to respond to you as quickly as I can.
All right, Kurt Miller, thanks for coming on, and thanks to Yale New Haven for providing financial support for today's program. We're going to take a little break, folks, but don't go away. Maybe grab a cup of coffee and come back with us a few minutes. It's One City Thursday, but we're doing it on Tuesday this week. We're having some of the young people and the grown-ups that starting this Thursday are going to be uniting neighborhoods across the city in 60 days with 60 events in 12 different neighborhoods. And also Kevin Ferraz says, thank you, Paul Kurt. Thank you, Kevin, for listening. So hold tight. We'll be right back here on WNHH New Haven's home for community radio.